Hello, everyone. This is Uljana from Raíces Cyber. I am the Director of Workforce Development, and we're here with another series of cybersecurity professionals and the different career paths in cyber. Today with us, we have TJ. TJ, if you'll introduce yourself for the Raíces community that is watching.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm TJ Patterson. I'm an information security officer for a financial institution. So my role is really to make sure that information stays protected in our organization. So we have sensitive data and making sure that stays safe internally, but then also all of our technology, making sure that there aren't any cybersecurity incidents that disrupt that technology. So at the end of the day, when we provide services to customers, we just need to make sure that those services stay running. And so yeah, there's a large element of protecting from cyber attacks.
No pressure at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. How long have you been doing this type of role?
Yeah, so I've been in this role, I think 3.5 years. Earlier in my career, I started in kind of a help desk role, so in IT. That was back in 2008, 2007, 2008, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so I've kind of pivoted around where most of my career has been very technical. So whether that be for a number of years, the traditional help desk, so helping repair computers, projectors, technology in general, but then later, managing and supporting data centers. So Microsoft Exchange before the cloud technology was heavy. So
That's
I used
right.
to
Yeah.
do, Microsoft Exchange deployments and Active Directory, but then have pivoted through the years in different roles, whether that be security engineering, security architecture, network engineering was very prominent. Probably one of my favorite roles and probably the most useful. Even today was the deep level of networking. Cisco, pretty heavy in the Cisco space for a long time. Um, but yeah, so I've kind of pivoted around through the years, and
Yeah.
then finally decided to land on more the risk side. I was very hesitant to step away from technical because I still enjoy doing technical work, but after doing it for a number of years, yeah, it's been worth it for me in the end. So I'm enjoying a new type of professional development and a slightly different type of career in cybersecurity.
And you're also in a leadership position, right? Meaning you manage other individual contributors.
Yeah, so my current role, I actually, strangely enough, don't have a direct reports. It's
Board.
kind of a
Okay.
unique role. So I've had direct reports in other security functions, like in
Mm-hmm.
a security operations center I ran for about a year or two, and I had a team of analysts and engineers. But in my current role, I do a lot of influence. So my entire uh, world at work is heavily based on influence. So I have authority where I can say we have to do these things, but if I want to get 500 people to do these things, I have to find very creative ways to influence that. And so I think a lot of people don't think of it this way, but there's a ton of human psychology to it. So,
Yeah.
building relationships with people. So when I say, hey, you can't click that link, they understand the why. And it's not just another person saying, don't do this bad thing or don't do this thing, if you will.
That's right. Give me the context as opposed to tell me what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's interesting you say that because I think what we're running into a lot, obviously the point of this series is to introduce more people into different pathways they can take in cybersecurity, and there's not one cookie cutter way to maybe, oh,
Mhm.
like the most admirable job to look at is being a pen tester, right? Not everything is pen testing and cybersecurity, red teaming. There is more diversity to the roles. And what has led you to where you are today is you mentioned help desk.
Mhm.
And I encounter a lot of whether students or those that are just graduating, and a lot of the advice a lot of practitioners give them is start through roles like that, help desk. And I have noticed that sometimes they look down on those roles, but really the people that start through that end up becoming more successful because they
Yep.
get exposed what to a lot of information that will
Yep.
help you down the road, right? Can you speak a little bit to that? Maybe give a little bit of motivation into
Yep.
why you should consider starting a help desk.
Yeah, and I've actually heard a lot of different perspectives on this. So I've heard a number of people, they'll say, why would I go into a help desk role? But I have seen a lot of folks come directly into cybersecurity. So they go straight into an analyst role, and there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with that. That's actually great. But I've also seen some of those people don't have some of the fundamentals, and it's not that they can't learn them, but it makes it a little bit harder. And whereas I've seen people go through the help desk roles or they get some base foundational IT knowledge, and as they have that and they start moving into cybersecurity more heavily, a lot of it is learning. I don't want to just say vocabulary, but if you can learn some of the vocabulary and some of the the elements of cybersecurity, what threat hunting really is, you can take that foundation from the help desk role and apply it. Like for me personally, there's a lot that I do now where in my role, had I not done network engineering for a number of years or help desk, I may not understand how some of the different components to a SIM or a security event management platform works. I wouldn't understand how, collecting logs over here, um, how that matters in the grand scheme of analyzing a bunch of data. But because of that network engineering background, I know how the different
Hmm.
parts work together. And the same goes with help desk. At the end of the day, I may be able to say, we need to have encryption on all these devices. But having that help desk role, now I understand what BitLocker really is, how it works, what does it take to enable it. And so I understand that day to day. And I know coming out of those roles, I also understand how, I'll use the word painful. A lot of times I think security professionals think, all right, here's all these vulnerabilities or all these things that we have to fix. But security professionals don't always recognize the level of effort that it takes on the IT side. And so
Hmm.
sometimes there's this communication gap. You get security professionals that say we need to fix all the things. And then you have all these IT people that say, no, that's not possible. But if you know a little bit of both sides as a security professional, you can use that one to gain credibility with the IT teams doing the legwork. But two, that helps you gauge, all right, I know that if I ask to do these things that I think are a really big deal, I know that it's going to cost this much time. And it helps, I think, with influence.
That's right.
Being
Yeah.
able to influence what's needed to manage those risks.
You learn to speak both of their languages,
Yes.
and yeah,
But
you can
yeah,
infiltrate both.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, more
And I mean,
job opportunities
yeah, and
too.
you mentioned earlier even the pen test. I mean, I know a lot of people, myself included. I used to be interested. I've dug into Kali Linux. I've gone
Mm.
looked through the OSCP certification
Oh,
paths,
yeah.
and I don't have that, but I've done the
Right.
digging
Yeah.
on it, and it's really cool and exciting. But I also recognize that in the industry, that's probably 5 or 10% of these roles, and it's understanding the for me, it's understanding the foundation, understanding some of the defending side, if you will. Um, I can speak both languages. I can understand when we're doing a pen test. I understand what's coming out of those reports. Or if an auditor, I'll give you a perfect example. Having the experience I have in the help desk roles and the systems engineering roles and network engineering, when an auditor comes in from the outside and they say,
Hmm.
"Hey, you're doing these things that are really risky," sometimes those auditors don't actually understand the technology that I'm talking to them about. And so that I have to help educate them to make sure that we're all speaking the same language of risk. So again, it goes back to some of that foundation.
That's right. Going back to before help desk, was that your first kind of introduction to cybersecurity, or was there
Yeah,
something
actually,
earlier in your
so
life that?
interesting story. There was, if you look online, there was I think it was a worm of some sort, this big virus called Conficker. It was like an April Fool's Day worm. And the organization I was working at was hit by this.
Oh,
And our antivirus tool was not getting rid of it. And of course, I got super excited thinking, I'm fresh out of college. I can go solve this problem. And so I started learning how to write scripts. And so I took a tool from Symantec and was able to package that up in a script and automate the removal of that worm across our entire environment. And that was kind of cool. That was the unofficial introduction. But the more official introduction for me was as a network engineer, I was asked to help build on our security operations center. I used to work for a managed service company, and I was asked to, step away from customer work and use the foundational knowledge I had to help enhance what we were doing on our security team. And again, the only reason I was able to do that is because of some of that foundational knowledge. And so I moved into a function where we were just building on our SIM platform. And from there, over the course of the next year or so, I actually pivoted straight into a director role. So I was in a leadership function and ran a security operations center straight out of that, almost straight out of that network engineering function, just because I had the depth. And so I did have to learn a lot. There were a lot of fundamentals on cybersecurity, some of the
Sure.
language that I didn't quite get, and I
Hmm.
had to learn some of that. But that was kind of my pivot point, at least for me.
Very, very cool. I think a lot of people that could be watching, they they are stuck in between different school of thoughts. They hear advice from so many people. They see so many things online. Then there's people that look at things like boot camps and
Yeah.
oh, like cybersecurity one is one of the fields you can like tap into without, a degree. And I personally agree a little bit with the degree part. I don't think every person needs a degree because even for my job now, like my degree probably help me in critical thinking, but there's other ways about like doing that, I think personally. But going back to from maybe your hiring manager perspective before and what you've seen in leadership positions, what would you recommend those that are interested in cybersecurity roles about what's your thought on certifications and then hands-on experience, how they
Yeah.
go about getting that and how they go about showcasing it on their resume or when the interview comes around?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you on the degree front, I actually don't have a bachelor's degree, and every role
Okay.
I hold
Yeah.
requires a bachelor's or a master's, and somehow I've been able to pull it off, I guess. Um, but what I found that's worked is certifications, not just to have the title, right? So the labels behind my name certainly help to get into an HR door. But what I found most useful is if I see, like in my case, I was very heavy in the Cisco space, and so I wanted to get security certifications or routing and switching, and I guess now my CISSP, I would take the certification, and I really learned through the journey. So getting the piece of paper for me was cool, but I really wanted to go through that journey. And the more time that I spent trying to learn the material, not just to pass a test, but actually learn the underlying material, that ended up being most valuable. Um,
Mm,
but even more importantly, I found the hands-on experience. So with security, you can go download sometimes demos of SIM platforms, and if you have a home lab, there's plenty of people on the internet. So you mentioned even you get all this different advice. There are tons of people online that will give advice on how to build a home lab,
mm,
and you can find bits and pieces and figure out what works at home. You can build a small lab at home with honeypots, network intrusion sensors, all these things that you hear about in the enterprise. There are ways to do it for very limited cost, if any at all, besides an old computer with the right software on it. And so I found that when I would do that, that helped solidify a lot that I was learning as I went through these different certifications. If it was Amazon AWS, I found ways to get the free tier on AWS and learn how to make configurations. Or when I would build labs, I would build certain parts of the lab, and the stuff that was really easy to do, I would shut down the lab and let it erase all the hard stuff, but leave that foundation in place. So all the IP addresses and all of that would stay intact. And then when I wanted to study the next night, I would just turn on that lab again, and all those things that took forever to configure, but they were really easy for me, those were all in place. And then that allowed me to practice on whether that's security with BGP and EIGRP, or from a SIM standpoint, I could implement a collector, and I could ingest logs from a home Wi-Fi
mm-hmm.
router at home. Um, so yeah, the 100%. I'm all in favor of certifications, but the big piece is going through that journey and finding ways to build labs to solidify and reinforce that information. And today, to this day, I attribute that to helping me the most in my career.
Mm-hmm. I think we need to. I know you also run B-sides for Dwayne, and in community spaces like that, I think it's very important we see more talks. For
Mhm.
example, at B-sides Athens and at Diana Initiative, I got to sit in a talk from Kat Fitzgerald, and Kat talked a lot about how like you can use honeypots to build your, first lab, and more talks like that, right, where we're actually showing. Um, Examples or walking through. Obviously, everyone has to create their own blueprint and their own path, but sometimes ideas help to
Yeah.
hear how you get started. And I even we ran a career village at B-Sides Chicago last year, and I met so many folks that just needed help portraying all the experience that they have or the the labbing they do, whether it's Hack the Box or like
Mhm.
platforms where it's not their own, but it's hosted and they go play around with that. That is also labbing experience, and just making sure that portray this in either a portfolio, a resume, or GitHub, and because we're not really used to talking about the work that we do.
Mhm.
So I think that's also important to like create spaces and opportunities at community events where we show more
Mhm.
how did I go about doing this, right?
Yeah.
Um, all right. So another important piece of this project is talking about the different career paths that exist
Mhm.
out there in cybersecurity. You have touched on, security engineering, security architectures. Maybe spend a couple of minutes talking about other career pathways in cybersecurity that are maybe neglected or maybe misunderstood, or maybe you would encourage, maybe network engineering as well, that you would encourage others to think, could this be for me, right? I don't want to say, do I have the right personality for the role, but are there characteristics that I might have as an individual that I might think that, oh, I didn't realize if you're a good communicator or if you're a good storyteller, you could be a good influencer down the
Yeah.
road in a position like yours, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think of GRC and risk-based roles, maybe on the audit side. So, I've seen a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks they do audits. Even the institution I work for, we have independent parties come in and perform audits. And a lot of what those individuals have to do is they have to communicate risk in the way that we understand. And sometimes, not just we like me, but also executives. So when they come into an organization, they're actually going straight to the CEO to say, hey, your IT and your cybersecurity professionals are telling you this. Here's what reality looks like. And sometimes it aligns, sometimes it doesn't, but it takes a very unique person or set of skills in communication to be able to translate between IT and those executives. Or sometimes maybe IT is, struggling to explain to executives why they need to spend money on a certain security tool. But
Yeah.
from lens, those outside parties, they could be an advocate for IT professionals. And so if you're really good at relationship building and communicating, an auditor or an examiner for any kind of regulated industry, especially, can become a huge ally both to executives and to the IT professionals. I've also seen I've seen some people that are just very head into keyboard. They're skill wise, they're not super great at it, and maybe B, they don't want to talk to people. I mean, some people,
Mm-hmm.
that's just who they
That's
are.
fair.
And
Yeah, right?
yeah, there are phenomenal careers in that. I mean, there's people I know
Yeah.
who they love looking at data. They want to do the threat hunting, and they do the analytics with all this data within a SIM platform. That's what they're good at. Businesses need those types of people. Some
Mm-hmm.
people, I mean, I know people who are night owls. Think about, security operations centers. A lot of times people don't want to work third shift.
Shift,
Well,
yeah.
sometimes that means, salary wise, there might be opportunities to work late night shifts if that's your thing and you love being a night owl and you're more about the data and not as heavy on interacting with people. Sometimes there are good fits there. So I've seen a number of different types of roles. I'm trying to think of other storytelling and some of the relational side fits in roles that are high visibility. And my role especially is heavy on the storytelling. lots of stories, lots of influence. But then there's other cases where sometimes you need to be direct incident response, let's say. I mean, I've
Hmm.
handled incidents, dealt with ransomware in the past in these really high stress situations. A person who can deal with really high stress getting potentially, I'll just say yelled at, right? So when an organization does not have a good incident response plan together, there's high stress, everyone's upset with everyone, but a person who can come in and be stability in a room, those types of qualities are really good for someone who's involved with incident response. And so I think, yeah, there's absolutely a large number of different, career paths, and you can develop skills over time. I've actually, I mean, personally, I spent the last probably 6 or 7 years really trying to learn how do I story tell. I realized
Hmm.
years ago that my career was coming to a cap, for me at least, if I didn't learn to tell stories and didn't learn how to translate between technologists and a business executive. And so I've spent a lot of years learning how to do that, and so people can make those pivots when they find something in their career, like I did. It was, hey, there's this interesting thing. I never planned on being in this role. That was never in the cards early on. But then I saw this cool opportunity and thought, I love
Yeah.
security. Let's just do it. And
So you saw the opportunity and you applied, or like did you actually like
yeah,
how did
so
that?
I was my formal introduction to cybersecurity was, before I moved into that security operations function, I basically said, look, I need someone to help drive this thing that we're doing. And I need some guidance. I need stronger leadership to do that. And
Mm,
that actually got me promoted. It was a whole situation. Basically, my unique challenge was didn't have the right guidance I needed. And so I
mm,
just stood up and said, I'll take charge. And all of a
right.
sudden it worked. And then the role I'm in now, I actually was leading an IT team with, I think, probably about 20 different individuals. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you really enjoy security. Why don't you just apply for this, information security officer role?" And so I was actually interviewing candidates for the role I'm in, and I didn't like any of the candidates. And I just
That is funny.
I just went to business leadership. I said, "Hey, I love security. I think I could do
Mm,
this thing. Why
yeah.
don't we talk?" And it wasn't, they didn't necessarily say, all right, he can do all these technical things. They
Hmm.
said, we know that he can communicate and he can influence and storytell. He's the perfect fit. And part of that was, we're going to pull him, being me, out of I'm no longer in a direct management function, but
Hmm.
there's an authority piece. So I still enforce policies and things like that. But I have the ability to influence laterally. I can influence upward to executives. And that's really the strength that I had. And that, I think, is one of the things that they saw in me that brought a lot of value to this. Plus, I was already in the organization and a trusted individual. And so they knew that I'd be able to find that balance between, risk management and getting overkill. Because I do think a lot of security leaders can take it too far and say we have to do all these things, but it just causes a lot of friction in the business.
It's funny how that worked out because like sometimes yeah you should nominate yourself for
Yep.
opportunities, and I mean throughout our careers I feel like we find more people that believe in us, but
Mm-hmm.
like we truly should be our own advocates for all
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. Um, so for the role you do now, what does your day-to-day look like? Meaning, you do a lot of influencing. We spoke a lot about like skill set, but paint a picture for us. Are you in meetings all day? Are you in meetings with different stakeholders?
Oh, actually,
Or are you like sending a lot of email? Just give people an idea. Like, is this for me? Could I be bored doing this? It sounds amazing, but what does a day-to-day or
yep.
weekly, week by week look like?
Yeah, I think sometimes it depends on the type of organization for this function.
Okay,
I
yeah, important.
personally, somehow, I actually don't end up in tons of meetings. I don't know how. Part of it is I just decline a lot because I value my time, so I say
Yeah,
decline to
that's smart.
things.
Yeah.
But no, there may be weeks where I'm in a lot of different meetings. I'll go through a phase where there might be 2 to 3 weeks. In fact, right now I'm in one of these seasons where I'm doing a little more presentation, storytelling, speaking to external customers, even recently. speaking to new hires. And so it's a lot of PowerPoint, a lot of visuals, fun
Mm,
stories. Like what I get interested in is, I mean, we're a financial institution. We see lots of bad things happen, and they're not so big that they're full blown incidents, but they're still small enough, still big enough events that people are surprised that we see these activities. And so I'll share stories of the security issues that happen inside of our organization, and I'll put a spin
mm,
on it. And I'll say, here's what happened last week, and you wouldn't believe it. Or I'll talk about the dark web, and it's a lot of eye candy. I'll usually show all the eye candy, get people excited about here's cybersecurity and all the cool stuff. And so I'll do that for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. But then I'll go
mm-hmm.
for a few weeks, and I might be looking. To me, this is one of the more boring parts for me personally, but I don't like looking at reports all day. And I review all of our third party vendors. So I look at pen test reports, SOC reports, all these different reports, hundreds of pages, and I'll go through those to make sure that those companies are protecting our customer data in a way that we would expect. And so I'll spend a couple of weeks doing that. Or there's other times I'll go through seasons where, and even recently I'm coming out of one where I might spend a lot of time working with IT, and I do get a little bit technical. So I'll be looking at the EDR tools and making sure that the way we have them configured is looking for the right things that we would expect. I'm looking at our data loss prevention tools to make sure that even though we have them implemented and IT says we're good to go, I'm validating to make sure that their configurations really are looking for files that are trying to leave the
Mm,
organization.
okay.
And so I will get a bit more technical there. Um, and so the nice thing about the role I'm in, or the part that I do like, is my role as an IT professional, or when I was in a technical role, it was very responsive. I did a lot of projects, but I also was very responsive to issues.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I generally
Proactive.
know, yeah, it's a lot more proactive. I know 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time what I'm doing. I build my own schedule. That can be challenging in its own ways. No one says this is what you do. I mean, I literally build everything. Um, Maybe 3 times in the last year and a half, someone said, "Hey, you have to go do this thing." It just doesn't happen. And so that's very unique to this role. So time management is something that I've had to get really good at because I'm driving the whole thing.
Yeah, you're
At
like
first.
what?
Yeah.
CTO, CRO, Chief Risk Officer. But it's like you're an internal consultant at the same time to
Yeah.
your own company, but also to stakeholders outside as well, to your
Yeah.
customers for your financial institution. No, I think that's a very, very good way to describe your day to day because um, again, we look at things like, do you want to look at data all day or do you want to look at people all day,
Mhm.
to interact with people all day, not just like stare like a creep. But another way to think about it, do you want to be reactive or do you want to be more proactive?
Mhm.
And I think that's actually one of the most neglected ways of how we think about what do I want my next role to look like, right? What will energize you throughout the day? Like if you're in an incident response role and you're pretty much freaking out the whole time because you think everyone is coming at you in a like and it's personal, it's not because people it's under high pressure, high stress.
Yep.
And also another good way for work for any vendor in their troubleshooting teams, the
Oh, yeah.
tech, whatever tech center they have, they get yelled at a lot
Yep.
too. But it's okay because at the end you'll be appreciated. But
Yeah.
you shouldn't go in a role like that if you want to feel appreciated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. It can be. I mean, that's actually one thing. One of the things I never expected, and the role I'm in now is it really is kind of a thankless job.
Yeah.
They teach. You're as a security leader, we're supposed to not always bring bad news. Sometimes that's easier said than done, and often I find that when I'm working with people, it's often to say, "Hey, we can't do this thing," and I have to figure out how to say, "But we can get you to do the thing safely another route." But a lot of times it's not received well, and yeah, it can be very difficult to navigate that. Um, but yeah, that was definitely a surprise. I think the more removed I've gotten from technology, that's a
Mhm.
major surprise I've had.
And I have one last question to wrap this up. And I had to say it. I waited all this long and I hadn't said the word AI.
Oh yeah,
How do you upskill, especially now being with your data like day looking so different? And you mentioned you have some technical components that you kind
yep,
of like chime in as the project needs it, but how do you make sure you stay technically sharp or up to date with everything that's going on with the AI boom,
yep.
and the risk that comes with that?
Yeah, so part of it, I just have to get in the weeds and like I'll explore and play around with things like Grok, Gemini, Copilot. Um, there's so much noise on social media and other platforms about AI. Sometimes I just let myself get in the noise so that I can see what's being marketed to the broader
Yeah.
industry. And like for our organization, I want to know what is it that all of our employees are seeing publicly so that when I do try and communicate risks, I know what they're getting from the outside. And then I can take what they're seeing from the outside and wrap it up and say, hey, here's all the stuff you all are hearing. Here's how it fits into our company. And then, we then implement, we'll permit certain AI tools and then encourage people to use it. So again, the influence in human psychology, instead of saying no, don't use all these things because they're bad, it's here are the tools that we encourage. All the stuff you're hearing around the world, let's use it, and then we put in the guardrails to protect it. But then on the technical front, I mean, I'll play around and try and upload data, even in our own company, or I'll do it outside the company on the personal side. But I'll practice. What does it look like when I upload files? What about Gen AI when it comes to image creation? How easy is it to make an image? And if I
Mm-hmm.
start doing that in my own day to day life, am I naturally wanting to lean on AI more? And if so, then I think, all right, I need to think about the employees again, or even people just in the personal lives of security. Everybody gets so accustomed to using all these tools. What is it they're naturally going to go to next? And how do I make sure I understand those risks? But in short, yeah, I play around with a lot of the tools. I'll make the videos you see online. Everybody makes all the humor videos, and I'll make a bunch of those with the Yeti or whatever, and just to get that exposure to the products.
So it sounds like you're just intentional about finding time, adding time in your day to day to enable yourself, but most importantly, you're sort of putting yourself in the shoes of what your
Yep.
uh like coworkers,
Yep.
colleagues are dealing with, so then you can kind of like understand where they're coming from when you want to influence them for those guardrails or not.
Yep.
Well, I really
Yes.
appreciate this conversation, TJ. It's been wonderful. If you have any last thing you want to share, feel free. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Really, the only thing, I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier, but just, I mean, there's so many different paths. There's so much noise. It's kind of like
Mm,
AI. Everybody says, "Here's my advice. Here's how you use AI." It's just there's a lot, and I think at some point you just have to jump in and try things because if you
mm,
always ask yourself, what do I do? Do I go to college and do this? Do I go to this certification? If you just keep asking the questions, you never do anything versus just try it. And
yeah.
eventually you kind of work your way through a path. And the other thing I think is important is your path may change, right? So if you have,
Mm,
family at one point, maybe you don't want to be working these insane hours and flying all over the country or the world to do troubleshooting and security issues for people. Maybe you want to be more local. And so there are different roles that I think are better aligned with that. And so I think that's the other key is just being open to pivoting at some point, and again, just trying different things and to navigate your way. And then, 10 or 20 years later, you'll look back and be telling these same stories. Hey, here's how my career worked. And you're just another, not just another, but you're another story.
right. Yeah.
It just
We're all
shows.
stories.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, love it. We'll link your information below. So in the future, if Raices members reach out to you, no, this is why. Just make sure you mention Raices.
Yes, I will do that.
Or go to besides Fort Wayne, right?
That's
Next
right.
year.
Besides Fort Wayne.
That's right. That's right. Then you can corner TJ in person.
There you go.
Oh, thank you so much. And we'll continue our series with the next profile.
Thank you.